Welcome back to the EMS Handoff Podcast. I'm David, and I'm going to reintroduce my co-host, Bradley Dean. We've been away for just a minute, but we are glad to be back. Jim's is hosting us once again, so we're going to give a shout out to the Journal of Emergency Medical Services as we get started. Bradley Dean, it's been longer than a week, but we are back. What's up, my friend?
Just trying to get a few things going. I had opportunity to do a little bit of traveling and a couple other things. So it's good to be back and pick up and get started. And at some point in the near future, you will probably see the background change and hopefully a new office that I'll be sitting in when we do the recording.
Nice. Because it has been just a minute, I'm still trying to get set back up in our office. We always have the EMS handoff back there, but, when you're not using it quite so much, the office seems to become the storage room, and, we're kicking off the dust, getting things ready back and rolling once again. So we're going to go ahead and jump right into it because if we don't, that's bad customer service.
That's right. So tonight, joining us to talk a little bit about customer service, and a lot of people say, well, EMS, when they call, they're not customers. So when the patients call, they don't get to choose who comes out to help them, but we still have to provide good customer service. And tonight, to talk with us about that, we've got Jonathan Jenkins from Mutual Aid EMS in Pennsylvania. Jonathan, I'm going to turn it over to you and let you kind of introduce yourself and give a little bit of background.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me back. I know I was on probably about a year ago-ish. Now I appreciate it. Had the opportunity to meet up with you guys at various points throughout the year, last year and early this year. So I appreciate you having me back. Like Bradley said, my name is Jonathan Jenkins. I am a paramedic and EMS educator in Westmoreland County, Pennsylvania. My full-time job is I am the education director at Mutual Aid Ambulance Service, which is a private ambulance service, nonprofit kind of deal in the suburban area, about an hour southwest of Pittsburgh. But in addition to that, I do a sort of a various different things. I run my own podcast, right? It's called Clinical Concepts. In addition to that, I'm an educator for the Lights Network, which is the Linking Investigators in Trauma and Emergency Services, which does some EMS research out of the University of Pittsburgh in conjunction with the Department of Defense. Previously, I'm board certified, well, still board certified, but previously I have a background in death investigation as well. So I kind of wear a bunch of different hats. But, when you guys had asked me to come on to this, one of the things that I am certainly passionate about is this customer service approach to acute care medicine. And I think that, and you guys teed this up terrifically. I think that oftentimes as EMS clinicians, we forget that when we go out to render aid for whatever the problem might be, it doesn't matter, that these people are paying for our services, right? And we have to provide them with a good experience and some level of customer service. And there are some patients that we encounter that make that far easier than others. But largely, I think sometimes we lose sight of that. And I think that we have to really make sure that we have this concept of customer service and patient and family satisfaction in our minds, because not only in EMS, the rest of the medicine world is doing this, right? Like if you think about what they do in emergency departments, there's Press-Ganey scoring and things like that, and although we don't have a formal nationally recognized feedback mechanism for patient satisfaction and customer service in EMS, at least not that I'm aware of. A lot of individual ambulance services look for this feedback, and I think that it's something as clinicians we also need to be looking at as well.
Well, I think you bring up a very good point about our brethren and the brothers and sisters in the other parts of the healthcare realm, because a lot of the stuff that we see ends up starting there and then making their way into our profession as well. And so, now the Press-Ganey score, like you mentioned, is tied to a lot of different things, but overall, we have to look at satisfaction within the healthcare realm as something that we've got to deal with, because there's a few different reasons as far as what I see. One of the things is, one, there is evidence out there that treating a person well, looking at the mental aspects of injury or illness at the same time you're looking at the physical aspects of injury or illness, and treating them both actually heals the patient faster and more holistically than just worrying about the physical side of that injury or illness. But two, if we're in a bad situation and we bring in a bad attitude or bad customer service, then that situation is escalated and causes even more trouble before we ever get to the transport aspect of that. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I think that, if from as well as patient satisfaction, I think there's also a career satisfaction side of this. So I think that a lot of us fall into this trap of, and myself included, I've done it at times. I'm sure you guys are no different. But we fall into this trap of, I don't want to go take that person to the hospital at 2:00 in the morning for X, Y, and Z problem. And the reality is, whether you are happy about it or mad about it, you still have to go. So if we're going to go, we might as well go and be happy about it, because we have to go anyway, and being mad doesn't solve anything. But also, that just provides the patient with a better experience. They don't have any idea or any concept of the fact that you have had a hard day already. They have no concept of the fact that you've been busy. They have no concept of the fact that anything else has happened. The only thing that they are aware of is that emergency that is plaguing them at that time when they called. And when we talked about this previously, when I did my lift assist episode with you guys a year-ish ago, we talked about the fact that not everybody needs the emergency department, and I agree with that. But the reality is, there's not a lot of other options. So we have to figure out how we're going to work through these problems with these patients in a way that is uplifting and supportive to whatever their need might be, that also gives us the career satisfaction that we are looking for at the end of the day as well. And this concept really started with me. I read a book, I don't know, a couple years ago, and I forget who wrote it. I want to say the last name was Lee, but the title of the book was "If Disney Ran Your Hospital." And I started to think about, hey, well, what if Disney ran your ambulance service, right? And I sort of made a lecture kind of based off of that. And really, I think that there's a lot of factors, but I think globally this comes down to confidence building in our EMS clinicians to be able to actually go and deliver a high patient satisfaction customer service approach to their care. It comes down to information sharing, and it comes down to attitudes and how we approach it. And everybody has a bad day. Like I said, nobody is going to get this right 100% of the time. It's just not realistic. But I think you have make an awesome point right there. Not everybody's going to be happy all the time. And if you do, you get in there. There is a far side of this where you have that toxic positivity where you go too far and everything is a positive. But I kind of take a look and a couple of things that you made mention there are absolutely phenomenal. The Disney experience. And I remember going when my daughter was 5, her stroller actually broke the wheel on the stroller. And I just asked him, like, hey, do any of y'all by chance have a screwdriver? And because it was an easy fix, it had popped out. I needed to pop a ring out and pop it back in. And my goodness, those people were on top of it. You would have thought like that was the only thing that was there. And again, their role is that it's supposed to be the most magical place. But I look at this a little bit, and I think you've kind of said it, but I want to explore something here. We have 2 different restaurant chains down here, fast food restaurant chains. One of them, everybody knows, the Golden Arches of McDonald's. And the second one is Chick-fil-A. And Jonathan, do you have Chick-fil-A near you? We certainly do. And those people should run the country.
Absolutely. So there's a couple of things to this, and I find quite interesting. If you take both of them during, say, lunchtime, both of them tend to have a line wrapped around the building. And the joke is whenever you tell them thank you or something, it's my pleasure at Chick-fil-A, where the other side, they're constantly moving you. And I think it's kind of interesting when you take a look at the sum total, and this isn't attacking either restaurants by any stretch of imagination, but I think that attitude then reaches out to everybody within there, and it makes a better working environment, because when you go to one place and everybody seems to be bickering and fussing at each other and really fighting to just get cars through, and the other one seems to enjoy it, and one of them does it faster than the other, and I think part of it is that attitude.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. Sorry, Bradley, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, so it's funny you brought up Chick-fil-A, because we see, kind of what we do, and we try to improve our customer service. So I grabbed a manager at Chick-fil-A one afternoon at about 3:30 when they weren't that busy. And I said, how do you teach your customer service stuff? What do y'all do in your orientation? What is so special? And they said, we don't teach it. We just expect it. And it becomes the expectation, and it's the culture. And if you don't do it, then you don't work there.
Yeah, and I think all roads, in not just in EMS, but in any industry at some point in any organization, lead back to your culture. I think that's a fair blanket statement, and it promotes efficiency. So on the topic of Chick-fil-A, I just recently found out that during the COVID pandemic, how the Chick-fil-A drive-through set up, right? So like they take your order and then you go to the window. When that happened, the federal government actually contracted with the Chick-fil-A organization to have them help design COVID vaccination and testing drive-through clinics to maximize efficiency, right? So like it's crazy to think that we were living in a time where the people that make some really good chicken were actually helping do medicine. But the reality is, and it's not to bash on either restaurant, right? Like I like a Big Mac as much as the next guy, but the reality is the federal government doesn't just call you if you're not doing a good job.
Right.
Right. So in the midst of a global disaster. So I agree, Bradley, 100% that it all comes back to your culture. And one of the things that we could do to improve customer service so immensely in EMS, if we did nothing else, if we did this, it would help us immensely. Think about a time where you have been in the station, on a call, whatever it might be, it doesn't matter. And a colleague or a patient says something and your rebuttal is negative, right? So if, here's an example. Oh, well, I went to the hospital. We're taking care of a patient. We go to the hospital and the hospital's really busy. Well, instead of saying, yeah, the hospital's really busy. And that's a drag. No matter what, that's a drag. But we're going to make sure that we get you in a bed. We're going to get you comfortable. We're going to get you all the information. It'll be okay. Versus the hospital's really busy. Yeah, they're always busy here. They suck. They don't care, this or that. That happens, right? Or think about the internal optics. How many times, David, you're a paramedic program director, as am I. How many times have you had, or probably not had, but seen this interaction? Oh, you want to be a paramedic? Yeah. Why on earth would you want to do that? Right? That happens all the time.
Yes. Even for those that are in the program that maybe with preceptors,
right?
Like you need to find somewhere else to go.
Right. Like we sent you a student and you're a preceptor and you're asking the student why in the heck they would want to do this job. Even though that's not a patient, that's a customer service problem, right? Because that student is paying, presumably, for their EMS education that preceptor is now intricately involved in. And David, I can't speak for your students, but my students spend more time out there than they do with me. So that's a customer service thing. We have to positively promote what we are doing in EMS, because EMS, we always hear like, oh, what are you going to do when you grow up? Like, you can be a paramedic when you grow up. Like, that's a real thing. And it's okay. Bradley, I know your background is more fire-based, correct?
No, it's for EMS.
EMS. Okay, I knew that you were tied into fire somehow.
Yeah, I'm tied in.
But whether you're in a fire-based EMS system or whether you're in a private EMS system or public EMS system, like however that looks, we have to promote EMS. Like that is a real job. And when we do that, then our care gets better. People ask me all the time, as recently as yesterday, oh, hey, you're a smart kid, and I don't like to talk about myself like that, but like, hey, you're a smart kid. Why didn't you go to medical school? Because I like being a paramedic. Like, and that's okay.
Well, I was at when I was in DC this past week, and one of the individuals I was talking to, his role was going to medical school. That's what he was going for. He decided to jump over here so he could do something in the meantime and make his application better. We've all kind of heard that part, and he's like, I like this, and he actually ended up taking this route. But again, something you said, it ends up making the care better. So I want to take this in a different route. All of us tend to have these, and I'm going back to fast food. I apologize about that, but going back to our two restaurants, our McDonald's and our Chick-fil-A, when you go in, you kind of take a look. And one of the things that we see is at one restaurant, every time you go in, there's somebody else, there's somebody new there. Went to one and they're like, hey, what's your role here? And he's like, well, I just got hired here. It's like, well, you must have been here for a while. No, I just got hired here as well. And like everybody that was on shift had been hired within like the last 3 weeks. But you go to the other restaurant where we talked about that, that highly engaged, positive attitude. And you go in there and you see people there for 6 months, a year, 2 years, and even longer than that. And so that positivity also brings around retention. And when you have a high level of retention at your service, you end up knowing people better. You end up having better care, knowing your protocols better, helping you build your own protocols, those kind of things, right?
Totally agree. And I think we have to remember that it's okay for people to use EMS to then go to medical school. Like that's okay. The world 100%. needs those people, because 100%. If those, but we're approaching it the wrong way. I think, in my opinion. So if I think Bradley's going to come to my EMS agency and he's going to work here for 3 or 4 or 5 years, and then he's going to go to med school, PA school, fill in the blank, doesn't matter. Well, he's not going to be here. We don't care. Well, no, we do care. Because number one, I would much rather you be a really good employee for 5 years than be a dirtbag for 30, right? So that's the first one. The second thing is that if we give Bradley a really good EMS experience, what's he going to do? He's going to go to med school, or he's going to go to PA school or nursing school or whatever. And then he's going to be an advocate for EMS, and he's going to still be involved in EMS in a different direction. So I would bet, David, when you were at the NAEMT Day on the Hill last week, there were people there that were physicians and PAs, yep. and that wear all those hats that are still supporting EMS, just in a different way. And if you want to come to EMS and be here for 30 years, that's cool. Like, we'll support you in that too. But we can't diminish the kid who's just using this to get to somewhere else, because he's using it for the right reason, and he's going to help EMS in the long term. I think that's really important.
Well, we're starting to see some of this shift as well. And I'm going to use an example of Austin Travis County. They have PAs and NPs that are on the road right now. So even though they're moving on per se, they're still in the field, operating as PAs and NPs, changing the way, helping their response, helping their mobile integrated healthcare and community paramedicine programs, and advancing the EMS profession even after they moved on. And not only that, but how many of these individuals, I'll use my medical director for an example. He talks about how the fact he ran an ambulance service with the Air Force when he first became a physician. And guess what he does now? Up until recently, as he started to divest a little bit of his duties, because he's in retirement now. He's been our medical director. He's been the fire department medical director. He's been up to like 6 or 8 different services medical directors and engaged with them in advancing protocols. And when a paramedic comes up, he advances that because he's been tied to EMS since the very, very beginning. So even if they do move on, they're not just an advocate. Many of them are coming back and actually being directly tied to those services. So I want to continue to have this conversation. And I will say, since the last time we jumped on here, I don't know if you're there or not, Bradley, but I found myself on TikTok here about 3 weeks ago and really started to expand it and had some fun during an AMT Day on the Hill. But I'm going to give a shout out to one individual because he had a phenomenal statement the other day. And I actually had to be taken back because he spoke my story. Because I think this is a story for so many that have been in this profession for so long. But the individual's handle on TikTok is Terminal Paramedic. He's an East Tennessee paramedic. But he had a story about they just got done taking a frequent flyer to the hospital. And I was like, oh gosh, where's this going? Because, we know as soon as you hear that little nom de guerre, that negative term of a frequent flyer, we usually see that going in a bad direction. Like, why? But this dude had a phenomenal message. I'm going to make sure to give him a shout as well. But he's like, I remember the days. He goes, I just sit back here right now. I'm so thankful that I got to take this patient to the hospital. He goes, back in the day, I complained. He goes, I'm like everybody else. I complained and griped and moaned about the fact that we had another frequent flyer. And I'm like, oh, dude, I could remember one of them. We ran this guy 3 times a day. But you got into this guy's story, and it really wasn't until after I left and I started thinking about this guy's story. It's like, dude, he actually had a life that he led, and he had one situation that occurred and it changed his impact. But the more I dwelled on that negative side, the more I spiraled to the negative side. But this guy finally changed his mindset and was able to go, this is actually a great experience. I was able to have a conversation. So even though you're in that negative spiral, if you find one little glint of hope, you can change that mindset around and come back. So just because you're negative, just because your area is negative, the culture you have is negative, doesn't mean that it can't be saved. It can't be fixed. It can't be returned and brought back to a positive customer service experience.
And with that, I will say it is really, I see it as a privilege to be able to transport a lot of these patients because they invite us into their world. We get to see what nobody else does. And as a piece of that, we have the opportunity to affect the outcome of those people. And I tell our people, I understand you get up in the morning, you might kick the cat, spill your coffee, do whatever, have a bad day, come into work. But when you run that call, you've got to kick the door in smiling because they expect, good service from us.
Well, yeah, it's very interesting, Bradley. Jonathan said it earlier, like they called, we're supposed to be there. Why? They're not a customer, they're a patient. And, I don't know if anybody, most people don't call 911 on a good day, right? It might be pretty outside, it might be nice weather, we're going into spring and weather's turning better. So it may look like a pretty day outside, but not many people just call 911 because they're having a good day. So, but that doesn't mean that we can't show up and try to make that little bit of their time just a little bit better.
Yeah. So I'm going to ask this. Does service excellence in EMS translate to better patient outcomes and stronger collections?
Yes.
I agree.
So there's plenty of research out there that shows with other healthcare systems, it does. But there's very little research that says that's the case in EMS. There's not a whole lot out there on customer service in EMS. I mean, you've got articles here in GEMS and a few others that are out there, but there's not a whole lot. And, like we were talking about, Chick-fil-A, it's the culture. Attitude is contagious. And if everybody else has a bad attitude, you don't have to pick it up. You can be the change, for that culture. The problem is right now everybody's looking for staff because we've got staffing issues. But at the same time, as Jonathan said, look at the people that you're hiring. You've got somebody over here that might stay for 30 years, but you got somebody over here that might be here for 5 years and go to medical school. I'd rather have that, good employee for 5 years than a horrible employee for 30.
Yeah, I agree. And I think to piggyback sort of off of both points, I think that there's a couple things that, the first thing, to go back to David's point, is that we talk about these frequent flyers, right? I have a colleague who always calls them loyal customers. And the reality is, just to what you said, nobody calls 911 because they're having a great day. So I think the first thing that we can do to change it is remember that maybe they're, quote, abusing the system because the system hasn't met their needs. That's the first thing. The second thing is that EMS is a weird job. Like, it goes against every single thing your parents taught you as a kid. Go to the stranger's house, knock on their door, let them invite you in, go into their house, into their most intimate of places, right into their bedroom, into their bathroom, while they're partially dressed. Now they're telling you the intricacies of their life, but we just met 45 seconds ago. That's a privilege. And we need to evaluate that and look at that as a privilege, because I think that that's what it is. And Bradley, I think the answer to your question is unequivocally yes. Better customer service equates to better outcomes. Can I quantify that or prove that or cite that? Unfortunately not. But I would be willing to bet that that's the case. And culture and attitude is contagious. And we have to be the people that emulate that. My favorite partner that I ever had, his name was Adam. And Adam and I, it was actually very interesting because when he and I started working together, it was one of those things where, like, he didn't talk very much and I didn't talk very much. And I kind of thought he hated me and he thought I hated him. And the reality was just kind of put two introverts on an ambulance and that's what you get. But when he and I got to the point where we realized that we really kind of emulated the same values, we used to just always kind of just between the two of us call it, we're just doing our thing. When everybody else is going to be angry or mad or disgruntled or this or that, we're just going to go do our thing. And our thing was, we're going to do the best that we can do in the nicest way that we can do it for every patient that we encountered in that shift. And were there times that we probably did it better than others? Sure. Were there times where maybe he didn't feel great or I didn't feel great, or it was your last day before vacation, or, you were just having one of those days? Sure. Nobody gets it right all the time. But more often than not, we were getting it more right than everybody else because we were making an effort to get it right. And nothing that we were doing was hard. We were just doing good care and being nice to people. And people really remembered that. And then that started to trickle down to some of the other people on our shift, and they saw that, like, we weren't miserable, like we were just going and doing it. And I think that it really starts internally in our own shops and with our own culture, before we can then take it out there, because there's this, I don't want to call it a stigma. A stigma is a good word for it. There's this stigma in EMS, and I don't know if you guys see it, but like, being burned out's not cool. Being a jerk's not cool. Like, it doesn't make you look cool. Doesn't make people think you're smart. Like, it just makes people think you're a jerk. And it's not. Like, you're just coming off as a burned out jerk. It's not cool. Like, what's cool is to be smart and to do good care and to be nice to people and be the people who remember you and remember your name because you made that impression on them. Or they might not remember your name, but when they tell the story about that bad thing that happened to them to all their friends, they say, you know what? And the ambulance came and these two guys, they were on it and they were really nice. That's what we should be doing. That's what EMS is. It's not drive fast with the lights on and hope it works out. It's not
So
it.
let's take things look at things a little bit differently. So let's look at the leadership side of this. So does this mean, I'm going to ask a question first, and it's pretty much rhetorical, but I think it's kind of important. So does this mean that we don't get into the discipline side when something happens?
The discipline side of
the profession. So as a leader, there's times currently that we spend time on the discipline side. If we're doing positive customer service, which as a leader is to our people and to the community we serve, does that mean we can't discipline people?
So I think it's a big question. I chalk it up with, do we discipline people for medical care errors? That's kind of how I view it. That's just me personally. So in a just culture, if I make a medication error or I report a near miss, I don't get disciplined for reporting a medication error or a near miss. I get re-educated on my medication error or on my near miss. And I may get the medical director conversation of like, dude, that was bad. Really, we should do that better. Right. But I don't get formally disciplined. Now there's a record of the fact that I got re-educated, but it's not disciplined. Now flip the situation. I make a med error and I lie about it. Now I get disciplined. Right. Because really the reality is most med errors aren't harmful and it's not a big deal, right? Like it's going to happen if you do this job long enough, but if you lie about it, that's a big deal. So I think from a customer service leadership perspective, if a patient calls and complains and says, Jonathan took care of me and he was a jerk for whatever reason, and you come to me and you say, did this happen? And I say to you, yeah, it sure did. Okay, well, number one, like we shouldn't, but like let's work through that and do whatever that education looks like and go from there. Versus this person called and said, you're a jerk. Did that happen? No, it didn't happen. We were really nice to them. Like my first thought is like, then why are you yelling at me? Like that's my first question. But
yeah,
but I think it depends. Would I have any problem disciplining somebody for being a total jerk in the right situation? Probably not. But would I have a problem disciplining somebody who maybe was well-intentioned and just didn't come off correctly and totally owned it? Yeah, I probably would have a hard time with that. So I think it's a really challenging leadership quandary. And Bradley, I know that you, like I said, you have an EMS background that sort of tied to the fire service, and the fire service has probably a some kind of a playbook for this. And I'm curious to kind of hear how that plays out. And, David, same deal. But yeah, I mean, I don't know what the right answer is. Definitely maybe. I say yes as I shake my head no. Like I think it's hard. It's a hard question.
So I find this interesting because I've had these conversations before. It's like, well, if you go out there and you're this happy-go-lucky leader, then you lose the ability to discipline when the circumstances arise, which is one of the reasons why I asked that question. But it's one of those things as a leader, we serve our people as well. They're out there, and as you mentioned, just culture and owning that. As a leader, if I don't provide something, it's up to me to make sure that that's right. But yet we do have the ability to turn around, and if the situation warrants, then it needs to be disciplined. If not, we can find other ways. And it's interesting you mentioned what you did about the process of re-education and such like that. It's one of those things that if there's a discipline issue, then you've got to take care of that discipline issue. But if it's one of those intermediary kind of things, then finding a way to keep it from getting to a discipline. And I think having the buy-in of your people, which goes back to this customer service environment. Am I providing you what you need? Am I trying to do what I can? It's funny. You go to those places that we've been talking about in the fast food world. You go to those that have a bad environment, usually from the top down, and they're like, I'm out of here at 4 o'clock or whatever my time off is. But these other places like, hey, let me pick up something for you here while, cause even though it's right at my time to get off, I'm going to do this for you. You get that buy-in by creating that environment. Then they're going to go the extra step. Hey, do you need me to stay over because we're short? Or do you need somebody to take this call? Or are they going to duck back and stay in the hospital a little bit longer to make sure they don't have to take another call? So I think that's one of those unique situations. Even though you're creating that customer service environment, trying to help your people out, you can still discipline. You can still re-educate as necessary. But by creating that environment that they know that just because somebody calls and says, hey, Jonathan did this, doesn't mean you're going to get fired right away. It doesn't mean you're going to, lose benefits somehow, that you're going to be treated as a person, you're going to be respected, and you're going to be able to do what you need to do to move on from that.
Yeah. And let me just throw one other thing in there. I think as an EMS leader, it's really easy to get disconnected because we end up, David, you said it right as we were waiting to start. Why is my email emailing? It's Sunday night. That's just how it goes. Like, my phone rings all the time.
Yep.
My email goes off all the time. Right. And I personally am working to make a conscious effort of being the person that says, like, okay, you need this. Can it wait until Monday? Like, I'm trying to be better at my work-life balance, and I have days that I'm better at it than others. But
as we sit here at 9:30 on a Sunday evening recording.
Yeah, but this is fun. It's different. So I think it's easy to get disconnected. And we go to meetings and we have this and we do that. And you were in DC and you have this thing and you have that thing. And sometimes our people think, well, you just don't get it. You're in your office, you're this, you're that. And we have to be out there doing it. Like, so I can't speak for your shop. My educators have a requirement that they have to work clinically 20 hours a month to maintain their status as an educator. Right. And I don't care if they work 21-hour shifts, if they work a 24-hour shift, but they have to work clinically 20 hours a month, because they have to be relevant in the classroom. And I think as an EMS leader, you have to be relevant operationally. So when I go on calls in my agency, whether I ride the ambulance or the other day, I went on a call on my way home from work because I passed it. And I pulled in and just, hey, you guys need any help or whatever? And the guy ended up being sick, and I actually ended up transporting with them. When we got to the hospital, I said, you know what? I'll take the chart. No big deal. We got there at the same time. All good. They just looked at me like it's okay. Like, you're here all weekend. It's a Friday afternoon and I'm going home. I'll take the chart. It's okay. I got it. Because over the course of the weekend, you're going to have 15 more. And is that one chart going to make a huge difference? No. But it was my way of being able to help those folks out. And I think that sometimes we lose sight of that. And we have to remember that as a leader, they don't work for you. You work for them. Like really, like literally my job is to make your job easier. And sometimes people are mad, and sometimes people just want to be heard. And sometimes people call and say, well, I think we should do this. And the answer is, yeah, that's a really good idea. We should do that. Or sometimes the answer is no. And this is why we can't, because of ABC reason that you didn't know about, because you would have no way to ever know about that. So I think as leaders, we have to remember that our job is to support our people. They don't support us. Right. And if you do it right, that relationship meshes, I'm having a stroke. It meshes, right? So like, by supporting them, they're supporting us. It doesn't have to be this divide, but we have to remember that that's our role. Our role is to support them. And because a lot of us came up in an EMS world where we probably didn't feel that supported, at least I did. I had some great mentors, don't get me wrong, but globally, I'm not sure that I always felt supported. So we have to be the people now that say, you know what, we have the opportunity to make a difference and make a change, and we should.
So I'm going to bring up a book and I'm going to try to look it up before we wrap up. If not, I'll have it in the show notes. But it was quite interesting. They were talking about Toyota car manufacturing side of the house, and one of the things they were talking about, there was a plant that was a former GM plant, and this plant was very much known for its worst production in the country. There were all kinds of issues that cars came out of that area. And ultimately, that plant ended up getting shut down. Toyota ended up buying it. And evidently, part of the deal was they would hire back as many of the people that worked there under the previous name as possible. And they're like, why would anybody want to do this? Because they were the worst performing people out there. Toyota's like, I think we can do this. And they opened it up. And the people started coming in. They every portion of the manufacturing plant had this little white chain overhead that anytime anything happened, they were supposed to pull that chain. As they first started, they were so ingrained with the way that they had been done before that nobody wanted to touch that chain. The CEO and the founder at the time was watching the floor when it happened, and said he saw this one guy sitting there trying to fix this problem. I can't remember, it was like a cross-threaded screw or something like that, but he was fighting with it. So him and his team went down there. He's like, pull the chain. He's like, I've got this. I can do this. He said, please pull the chain. It was trying to get him to actually take the effort himself, not take over for him. But he's like, I need you. He goes, I want you. I implore you to pull the chain. And ultimately the guy didn't, so the CEO did. And he's like, so sorry, I didn't, mean to mess up the line. He goes, no. He goes, I apologize to you because evidently I didn't give you what you needed to know that I actually wanted you to do this. Now, can you fix this problem or do we need to do something? He goes, hold on. He got the tool, fixed it, opened the line back up. And he's like, I apologize. And that was their mentality. All of a sudden, this production plant, which had been the worst and been closed down because it was so bad, was the highest performing of all industrial or automobile production plants in the country. And it's like, you invest that as a leader. You said, that this is the CEO, the guy that the name of the company is basically after him. And he's like, do this. He's like, I want you to do this. I need you to do this. And trying to invest that into those people. And then they turn around and invest their time back into the product. And that case study was phenomenal to me. It's like, just pull the white chain.
And that's exactly it, right? And let me shameless plug another book here. So it's called Unreasonable Hospitality, and it's by Will, I'm going to butcher his last name, Guidara, I believe is how you spell it, or how it's pronounced. And Bradley, I can send you a picture of it so you can put it in the show notes too, or David, either way. But it's about this guy named Will Guidara who owned and operated a restaurant in New York City. And the restaurant was very, very, very low on the rankings. And his goal was to make it the number one restaurant in the world. And that's what they did. And to Bradley's point, when we were talking about Chick-fil-A, they did that through, well, how do you get your people to do this? Like, we just expect it. That's how we do it. And they worked through all of this to make their restaurant the best restaurant in the world. And what they realized was, we don't have to overhaul the restaurant. We just have to overhaul the little things that we do. So think about what you do in an ambulance. What's the number one reason people call and complain? They were rude to me. That's the first reason. What's the second reason? They didn't treat my pain. So let's think about this for a minute. What are the little things that we could do in the ambulance to give these people a better experience? How about when Grandma Betty says she's cold, just give her another blanket or turn the heat up? What do? We sometimes sit there and we say, "Oh, we'll be there in a minute. It'll be okay." Right? Or Our excuse for not covering them up well when we take them out in the ambulance in January is it's just a really short distance from where we park to the door. Or, yeah, I'm sure that your back really hurts, but your vital signs are fine, so it's all good. No, we have the ability to give them the blanket, to turn the heat up, to treat their pain, to do all of these different things. And those are little things. Like, they're not big grand scheme of things, spend a lot of money investments to improve our customer service. This is a blanket. This is a little pain medicine. It's whatever, like, oh, I'm not comfortable on the stretcher. That's a all the time one. Well, like, so first of all, we can all agree that they're not that comfortable, right? So, like, we can only do so much. I think that that's realistic. However, we could also do a little more than sorry about your luck. That's just how they are. We could make an honest effort to try to reposition some people or to put some padding in void spaces or whatever it might be. And those are very, very little things that will help us improve the customer service that we provide. If you went out to dinner, if you went to the Chick-fil-A and you got your chicken sandwich and your chicken was raw, what would you do? You'd take it back up to the counter and say, hey, I got this chicken sandwich and it's raw. And they would say, oh my goodness, that's terrible. I'm sorry. Give us that back. Here's a new sandwich. Here's your money back. Well, instead, we say, Grandma says, I'm uncomfortable. We say too bad. And then we send her $1,000 bill.
Yep.
Like, what if I told you that if she didn't have a good experience, you're not going to get paid? Bet you'd do it. Right. And unfortunately, that's not realistic, but I bet you your tune would change.
Well, so the question is, would it? If we're in that negative mindset and we're in the position where we tell Grandma, sorry, get over it, chances are we don't really care whether they pay it or not, because we don't see what that does in the grand scheme of things. That's also the same person that when we get down to it, the documentation, it's minimal, and chance of reimbursement on it's slim to none. There's a lot of things we come back to it, and then we say, hey, well, what does this mean to me? I've used this, and coming back from DC here this last week, I've used this in several legislators' office. Colorado did a sustainability task force, and they've got a 5-year plan going. Year one was their document, kind of positioned where they were, and they took a look at about $750 million, actually a little bit more, $750 million to run EMS in the state of Colorado, and they get reimbursements for about $450 million of that. So there's a $300 million delta between what it costs and what they are able to return based on private payers, private insurance, Medicare, and Medicaid, right? And so when you take a look at it, Jonathan, if you were to buy an ambulance right now, you have to do an RFP. And so you buy from David's ambulance company, and I quote you RFP $175,000, right? How much are you going to pay me for that ambulance?
$175,000.
Well, you don't want to pay that, right? You won't only pay $100,000.
Right. I would counteroffer
with my ambulance.
Right. I would counteroffer.
I'm going to drive off, right? Forget that. There's only one tangible value that we can negotiate, really. You did mention you can counteroffer, but I'm going to say no, 175. That's it, the bare minimum, right? There's only one cost on these ambulances that we are able to really manipulate, and that's the cost of me, cost of you, cost of Bradley. How do they make up that delta in Colorado? Most of those out there are volunteer ambulance corps. They ain't getting paid a dime. And so if we were to fix this reimbursement problem, like you said, give Grandma a blanket, and she's willing to pay her $1,000 bill. That's another $1,000 come in. That means I could get possibly another $1 an hour, $1.50 an hour, $2 an hour, or what most of us are really wanting is somebody to sit beside me. They could take these calls with me, or another truck in the system, or a QRV or something to take off the load of me and help spread this around. And I think that's where we kind of get into this and have to realize, hey, if I tell Grandma no, I'm not going to give her that blanket because it's only a short distance. She can get over it. And we realize, hey, if we do this, then there's a high probability that something's going to change in the future.
Yeah, and I think that just like you said, it all comes back to funding. It all comes back to reimbursement, and I am by no means an EMS reimbursement funding expert, but everybody that is involved in EMS should be involved in understanding what's going on. Because to David, to your point, well, if grandma doesn't pay her bill, what do I care, right? I took her to the hospital, right. My job's done. Well, I bet you'd care if I didn't pay you, right? I bet you'd care real quick if on Friday your paycheck didn't come.
Yep.
So, or let's talk about documentation. How about if I told you, if I can't bill for the chart you wrote, you don't get paid? Whoa, wait a second. I wrote the chart. No, writing the chart's not the game. Writing the chart so it clinically protects you,
right,
and provides a medical record, and B, allows us to seek reimbursement. That's the game. So, I say it all the time to my students: bad documentation equals bad care.
Yep.
If you didn't care enough to document it well, you probably didn't care enough to do it well. So, I mean, and that's just one of any number of examples, but we all have a responsibility to know what's going on and to be involved in those advocacy discussions. David, you said you were at the NAEMT Day on the Hill. I know the NAEMSP one is coming up in May, I believe, May or early June. There's a lot of different organizations out there that have those advocacy groups. You don't have to reinvent the wheel.
Right.
Just go get involved in one. And sometimes getting involved just means show up on their Zoom meeting so you can at least hear about what's going on. That doesn't mean you have to go spend a weekend in DC. We have people that do that. That's why we have the U's of the world. But really, that's your role. That's one of your jobs as a board member.
Yeah.
You don't have to go to DC necessarily. You can and you should, but you don't have to. Read the articles, seek the information, listen to the podcast, whatever it is. That's one of your jobs. And that also ties back into doing good customer service. Because you're a well-informed deliverer of the X, right? Not just of the care, but of the information.
Be involved. And I think that culture, that's not just a top-down culture, it's a bottom-up culture as well. If you're in the front seat of the ambulance, you can start there with you and your partner. Be positive. Help your patients out, help each other out. As a leader, make sure your people have what they need. So, Jonathan, we're going to go ahead and start to wrap up here. So go ahead and give us your final thoughts on customer service and EMS.
Yeah, so I think this is a conversation that we could have all night long. But I think if I had to leave anybody with one nugget of information, it's your brand matters and people remember it. And when I say your brand, I don't necessarily just mean the brand of where you work, because that brand matters too.
Right.
But your brand, right? You specifically, your brand matters. The people around you are watching you. The people in your agency as a senior person are watching you. Your patients are watching you. Their families are watching you. Don't be intimidated by that. Have a good attitude. Introduce yourself. Be the partner, be the preceptor, be the teacher, be the whomever that you wish that you would have had coming up, and get involved in things like NAEMT, the advocacy days, NAEMSP, the MIH groups that are out there. Whatever your thing is, the education groups, whatever your thing is, get involved, be informed, and be a student of your craft every day. And if you do that, and I forget who said it, but somebody like smarter than us said, if you read the literature of your field for 10 minutes a day, you will be more highly informed than 90% of the people that do the same job as you. And I think that that's really important. That doesn't mean you have to sit here and read a textbook,
Right.
right? Reading the literature of your field might be, give me the Spark Notes version of NAEMT Day on the Hill, right? That's good. That's good information. Read books like this. Read books like the book you were talking about. That is being a student of your craft. And if you do that, you and your brand will be leaps and bounds ahead of those around you, and you will begin to see it in your own practice. So I think that's my takeaway. Your brand matters.
Absolutely. I'm going to jump in before I give it to Bradley because, as an Apple fan, I think going back to even Steve Jobs' autobiography or semi-autobiography, since he had a co-writer with him as well, but he was so in tune to his. Now, as long as you knew that he was a prick and on drugs half the time, is kind of, or in the early days at least, he wanted to create something so phenomenal. But if it ever failed, he wanted to take ownership of it. He wanted to create that environment that, hey, we've got this. And now if you take a look at Apple, everybody talks about cultish-like environment, but their customer service, they want you to come into the Apple store. They want you to talk to the geniuses. They want you to be part of the process because they want you to buy their product. And so that brand is phenomenal. And we've talked about Chick-fil-A. What are they known about? Hey, thank you. My pleasure. And it's a joke. You can pretty much go anywhere and you can always find somebody that's been a Chick-fil-A employee because whenever you say thank you, their first response is my pleasure. And you can see that follow with them. So create that. I absolutely love that in brand. So Bradley, go ahead and give your last thoughts tonight.
All right. So hang on for just a minute because there are quite a few, but I'm going to try to sum up everything we've talked about in just a couple of minutes here. So, patients are always going to ask, when everything's done and we get them delivered to the hospital and everything, the questions that they're going to go back in their mind and they're going to ask is, did we arrive in a timely manner? Did we explain the treatment that they received? Did we treat them in a respectful manner? And did we take care of their pain and make them comfortable? Those are the 4 things that patients are always going to look at. Now, here are the top 10 things that are going to help us deliver good customer service. Work together as a team to care for the patient and make sure that we work smoothly. Control the patient. Number 2, control the patient's pain and suffering. Number 3, include patients in their decision about their treatment and allow them to make those decisions, or we can help guide them. 4, have good skills, be able to perform your skills smoothly. That means practice and practice and practice. Number 5, have a good attitude toward the patient's request. Number 6, address the patient's emotional needs. 7, keep the patient informed during your time with them. 8, be responsive to patients' concerns and complaints. 9, be positive and interact with the family when caring for the patient. Number 10, be friendly and courteous. So to sum all of that up with one little line is the patients may not remember exactly what we say or exactly what we did, but they will remember how we made them feel.
So Bradley, you've been doing some writing while we've been talking here. I see
That
what
was
you've been
beautiful.
doing. But man, how many of y'all have had somebody that has gone into surgery, and during that surgery, what does that surgeon do? Granted, he probably has somebody holding the phone up to his ear, but he calls you or she calls you. Like, hey, just to let you know, this is what's going on. All's great. Talk to you soon. I'm like, dude, you're supposed to have your hands in my significant, whatever. Like, you're supposed to be doing this thing, and you're sitting here talking to me. But they want you to be included. And that's phenomenal. Hey, Jonathan, if somebody wanted to reach out to you and talk to this topic more, how are they going to how are they going to get in touch with you?
Yeah. So really fast before, I think that the perfect way to end this, and I didn't think of it until you said what you said. And if you look kind of behind my head, I have it. It's the Steve Jobs thing. And what did he always say, right? Or what did they say in their Think Different commercial, right? The people that are crazy enough to think that they could change it are the ones that do.
Yep.
Right. So everybody out there needs to go try to change their part of the world. And if we do that, we will change it. right? It's going to take a unified effort. And I think that's the lesson to be learned. But to reach out to me, would be more than happy to chat with anybody. I'm on the social medias, right? The Instagram, Facebook, all the things. Jonathan Jenkins on those things. But if you wanted to send me an email, it's clinicalconceptspodcast@gmail.com. And I can send that to you guys to put in the show notes as well. But happy to chat with anybody further.
Absolutely. Bradley, if they wanted to get in touch with you and your list that you have there, how they get in touch with you?
So they can reach out to us on social media. Of course, we've got the EMS Handoff podcast Facebook page, or you can reach me at bradley.dean@handoffmedia.com.
And just like that, you can also reach me at david.blevins@handoffmedia.com. And if you want to have some fun, I'm enjoying learning more about the TikTok, and you can find me at Handoff Medic on there as well. I've already posted a couple things from this episode, mentioned the terminal paramedic, because I think I'm going to try to directly link to his video talking about that frequent flyer, because it is a phenomenal message, y'all. So customer service, that's what we've been talking about. For all of our listeners out there, we're so glad to be back on the airwaves, coming to you from the Handoff Media Studios. And we look forward to talking to you soon. Make sure you engage, go by Jim's and support their podcast where we're being broadcast. Find us as well. But until next time, remember the value of your EMS handoff.